Hello, and welcome to the Outcry Theatre Podcast. I'm Becca Johnson-Spinos, and I'm the Artistic Director of Outcry Theatre. Every episode of this podcast delves into the artistic process of creating theatre. This episode is about our current production of The Cripple of Inishmaan by the incendiary Irish playwright Martin McDonagh. Hi, this is Miss Becca, and I'm here with the actors playing Billy and Johnny in The Cripple of Inishmaan. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Elijah Harms, and I'm playing Johnnypateenmike.
Hi, my name is Harrison Polen, and I am also playing Johnnypateenmike.
Hi, my name is Calin Eastes, and I am playing Cripple Billy.
Hey, my name's Dylan Weand, and I am also playing Cripple Billy.
First things first, tell me a little bit about the show. What's it about?
This show is based in a small island off the coast of Ireland called Inishmaan in about 1934. This island is very small, has very few inhabitants, has lots of rocks, open fields, just very barren kind of wasteland, cows everywhere, not somewhere you would really want to live today or really ever. And it centers around, as the title would suggest, a cripple boy who is constantly being berated by the town, most of the time by the town's news person, Johnnypateenmike, who takes any small amount of news, whether it's super small things like a sheep not having any ears or a frog falling over, something like that.
So word quickly gets spread around by Johnnypateenmike, the news kind of spokesperson, about a film being made in Inishmaan called The Man of Erin, and nobody on the island is more excited about it than Cripple Billy, who just wants to get away and just go be in the film and just get away and escape from everyone that he has been around for his entire life.
So The Man of Erin is actually a real film that was made by Robert Flaherty in the 1930s, and it's kind of a docudrama about the people of these islands off the coast of Ireland, and the play kind of pokes fun of it a little bit because there was a lot in it that was manufactured to make these simple people and their kind of crappy lives seem heroic and special. A large part of the play kind of follows just the people of Inishmaan in their mundane and maybe less heroic lives in a more realistic style than maybe the film portrays. But it's also like super silly.
So this play was written by Martin McDonagh, who is my favorite playwright and a playwright that I have been dying to direct at Outcry for a really long time. But his plays are a little bit inappropriate, a little bit off color, and pretty dark. So we really hadn't tackled them until this time. This is our first time doing his work. Talk a little bit about, I guess, the style of the play and maybe his writing, what makes it so unique, why it might seem a little bit different than like a simple plot description of it may feel different than what it actually is.
He's kind of similar, Martin McDonagh, to Quentin Tarantino in the way that his dialogue and the way these characters live and work within the plot is so unique and so interesting and so often hilarious that a simple plot description doesn't really cover the interesting, unique awesomeness that these works give us.
The entire style of it, it's super like realistic, and I think how Martin McDonagh achieves this is just all the characters have such complexity with the relationship, and his writing's so brilliant with all his comedic timing and everything. I think his comedic writing is really, really good. It's really raw, but also with having this comedy in it, it's really interesting and brand new to me.
So I've been a longtime fan of McDonagh's plays ever since Miss Becca introduced me to some of his other well-known work. And I've always read it and thought I would love to do these kinds of things, but now that I'm actually doing one, it's so much different than I ever could have really thought that it could have been, because just the language is so strange, because obviously, we're all Irish people, and so in that we already have to speak slightly differently, but just the words that we use and just adding things to the ends of sentences or just flowing words together is quite remarkable with how he's able to write all of these like things that may not make sense, but you'll understand. And I have learned a lot from reading deep into these characters and this show.
So McDonagh also is a filmmaker. He wrote and directed. Probably his most well-known movies are In Bruges and 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri, both of which are absolutely incredible films if you've ever seen them. This show definitely does bear some similarities, but there's also pretty big differences. I would say it leans a little closer to In Bruges, but even more on the comic side, but still with those kind of dark, raw themes running through it. And there's just something about the way that McDonagh writes dialogue that it's at once feels like real people, but at the same time is so unique and outside of how people really speak almost. It's just something that's really special and such a joy to listen to and such a joy to speak as an actor that I absolutely love it. And of course, it's so hilarious. And the way he weaves his jokes and these threads of humor is absolutely brilliant. I've kind of fallen in love with McDonagh through this process.
I think everyone's sort of been circling around the language, which is obviously the key to his plays, is really the dialogue. And it's somewhere between like the most realistic dialogue you've ever heard and poetry. It lies somewhere in between those things. And I know that sounds impossible, but trust me, it's a real thing. And it's McDonagh's words. The characters feel absolutely real and feel absolutely like, of course they would say these phrases. But at the same time, it's really like, in some ways, these storybook characters who are larger than life and have kind of come to life, these Irish sort of folk tales that have really come to life in front of your eyes. We've been talking a lot about how funny the play is, and it is really funny, but it's also laced with this just sense of doom and tragedy, and it's also laced with this violence, and these characters are these characters who live on the fringes of society. They're all these sort of, in some ways, misfits who don't really fit in a traditional place, and they've all found themselves in Billy's old auntie's shop. He's brilliant. The work is brilliant. I know that the title, The Cripple of Inishmaan, might not sound like an exciting play, but I promise you that it's well worth it to come take a gander. This play has 9 characters in it, and we're only here with 2 of them, but each of the characters is super important and exciting and interesting. So you're only getting a small snippet of the characters here, but why don't you talk a little bit about your character and what they add to the show, what they're like, what they bring to the show.
So as we said earlier, me and Elijah play the character of Johnnypateenmike, who is basically the town's news person. He finds all the news. He digs at people for news. He even sometimes blackmails people for news. He will find news in any way possible. And in my opinion, he's kind of the driving momentum of this show. Anytime he enters the scene, the energy is immediately jacked up to 11. And he just runs around spitting things in people's faces, just like barely intelligible phrases to people. But at the same time, it's so hilarious and just witty. All the things that he's doing, he mocks people, makes fun of people, really jabs at their weaknesses, and the things that he knows will get a rise out of them. But at the same time, he's very smart and a little bit of a wimp, but he uses his wit and his genius intellect to get his way out of situations.
I'm a bit of a silly boy. I love comedy. I love a good joke, and being able to play this incredible character, Johnnypateenmike, is just it's so much fun. He's so funny. He's got so many great, delicious, juicy lines that are so much fun to say. It's just really, really, really a pleasure to be able to bring this hilarious, energetic, amazing character to life.
I think Cripple Billy is definitely a very, very interesting character and definitely one of the most intense roles that I've ever played. I think the relationships that he has with all of the characters is definitely very interesting. Like, with his aunties, he does love them, but at the same time, he really just can't stand them, and they're just pouring love over him that he's just kind of annoyed by. All he does is go stare at cows and read books and just kind of like longing for just like something like bigger and kind of like a bigger, like more just like adventure in his life. But I think what's kind of sad about it is even though he wants that and he wants to just do something of his own, just go do something big, he is hindered by his disabilities.
I do think Cripple Billy is a very interesting character. He is surrounded by all these like larger than life people, but he seems like he always wants to be alone and wants to keep to himself, and he's just like stuck in this world because of his disability. I feel like he's very isolated in a sense. I love Cripple Billy because playing his isolation and going off of that and all of his motives because of he feels alone, but also I think he's very genuine in a sense, but also not, which is also really interesting. He has all these layers and everything, and that's another thing with Martin McDonagh. I think he is really excellent at making these complex characters. So getting to play Cripple Billy, who has all these layers and it seems super real, is very exciting because I feel like I am playing out someone else's life, and it's just trying to figure out how they would react and how they would cope with different situations.
So what's been the most difficult thing about playing these characters?
With playing Billy Clavin, the most challenging thing, I feel like it's pretty obvious, it's his physicality, because you want to be very honest and you want it to be very real. You want to do the character justice. And so with Billy, his actual, like, what we have come to the conclusion of his disability, we say he has cerebral palsy. It's where you don't quite have full control or feeling in, like, maybe your arm or leg or something. And for Billy, it's half of his body, so it's one arm and one leg. So really getting this physicality down and making it seem like he's had this for years and years and has had to deal with this and his different coping mechanisms and what he does in his everyday life. That's the big challenge for Billy. It's making him be very real with this condition.
The physicality of Billy is definitely the most challenging part of playing him. I'm so used to just using all the parts of my body to do whatever is needed for that particular time. But now I have to keep my left leg straight at all times and make sure that it doesn't bend throughout the entirety of the show, which is very difficult. But I think while it has gotten very difficult, I've gotten more and more used to it, which does help in the fact that, Cripple Billy has had it for his entire life. Another very challenging part about playing Cripple Billy is definitely the accent, the Irish accent, which I have had a very hard time learning and getting better at it, because it's just saying all these words and all these kind of weird sentences that, like, these meshings of words that, like, you wouldn't really ever say. You have to say them, especially with this very difficult accent. And that is another very difficult part of playing this role.
So related to Billy's cerebral palsy, so all McDonagh tells us is that he has one bad arm and one bad leg. So that's all McDonagh gives us. So you kind of have to make your own decisions. It seems like the sort of basic assumption that most productions make is that he has hemiplegia, which is an aspect of cerebral palsy that affects one whole half of your body. It's this sort of thing that nowadays you'd be in physical therapy from the time that you were very small. So by the time you were Billy's age, you'd really have a really good handle on getting around and moving better with Billy's condition. But obviously he's on a small island in the middle of nowhere in 1934. So just his access to medical care and the way that his movement disability is treated is just so different than how it would be treated now. And so much of the show revolves around the fact that he is called Cripple Billy and how awful that is for him, and how his identity is wrapped up in his disability, and how he wants so badly to break free from that, be a person outside of that.
So I would agree with Calin that I think if you asked the entire cast of the show what the hardest thing was, it would probably be the accent and the speech, just because it's something that you don't do very often, and most people aren't very familiar with. I mean, they've probably seen somebody talk like it, but have never delved deep into it. So I think that's probably the hardest thing for a lot of people. But in the character of Johnnypateenmike, I'd say the hardest thing is probably finding the healthy balance between being the most absurd person on stage at any given moment, but also still feeling like a real person. Even though this character is hilarious and feels like a complete cartoon character, he still feels like a real, genuine human being living his daily life, doing his jobs, talking to the people that he's known all of his life, and doing all that kind of thing. And I think that's just been really difficult at times, because I'll be talking on and on about the craziest things, and then I'll need to make it feel real, make myself feel real, so the audience will believe me and that it could actually be a real person.
What's the most fun thing about playing these parts?
Getting to insult and berate basically every single person on stage with me. Now look, I love all my castmates, don't get me wrong. I love them, but you do not know joy until you are on stage yelling for 10 minutes straight, just like getting up in people's faces, spitting in their face. Just there's not much like it. And I know that sounds terrible, but when you're in the moment, when you're on stage, when you're across from people you know and you all know what you're doing, it's really magical to be able to just let loose and just go at each other. I basically have no filter, and I will do whatever it takes and say whatever I need to say to get what I want.
Well, I said the most difficult part about playing Billy is his physicality. I also think that is the most fun part of playing him, because it's so different than anything that I've ever done. You know, having to live with this physicality that Billy has lived with for his entire life is definitely extremely interesting thing to do. And having to, figure all the dances, like, what am I going to do with my bad arm? Like, how is it going to play into this and that? And it's definitely just really fun and interesting to think about, while also being very challenging. And another really fun part is definitely getting to be a very sad boy and getting to be alone and to myself and getting to be just a little bit of a jerk and, a couple of happy moments.
Love all the sad moments, but definitely going to take what you said with the happy moments. That's my favorite part of playing Cripple Billy. It's because he is a very sad boy, a very sad boy. He's very isolated and has to deal with all these people who don't quite understand what he's going through. So anytime I get to experience a very happy moment as Cripple Billy, it brings me a lot of joy, because it's just unlike anything else.
So Harrison was talking earlier about how he loved these kind of mean, angry, shouty berating of the other characters, and that's certainly a super fun thing for me. But I think something that's even more fun for me is when Johnny's not doing that, and he's being a little more passive-aggressive, and he's feigning offendedness, and he's dancing, and he's manipulating, and he's obfuscating, and he's beating around the bush. It's so fun to do, and how in some scenes he seems to have characters wrapped around his fingers doing whatever he wants, and how in other scenes certain characters just aren't taking his crap. It's so fun and so interesting to explore that.
So like I said earlier, there's actually 9 characters in this play, so you're getting quite a small snippet of the sort of legendary folk that inhabit Inishmaan. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other characters who figure into this play and what they bring to the story?
I mean, you got characters from a 90-year-old Mammy whose son has been trying to kill herself for pretty much her entire life by getting her to drink herself to death. And then you got characters like Bartley, who all he cares about is sweeties and telescopes. But I think my favorite character, and the most interesting, in my opinion, is definitely Helen, Billy's kind of love interest. She's such a jerk to pretty much everyone, including Billy. I mean, she mocks him for pretty much everything that he does, from staring at cows to reading his books or to his own disabilities, which is very sad, but is also very hilarious. And she also gets to just swear pretty much every other line, and she basically just does whatever she wants. She will kick people if she feels like they need to be kicked, or she will spit on anyone she wants to, and she's just such an amazing character and does have some sweet moments, but definitely just a very vibrant and extravagant character.
So Billy has two aunties, Auntie Eileen and Auntie Kate, that he lives with. Getting to act close with like Cameron and Isabella and Jackie and Jane, it's quite the experience, because they truly bring these characters to life, because these aunties, they're like Billy's mamas. They're just so much bigger than life, and they're definitely out of this world, and I think they're a great addition to the show.
All these characters are so amazing. It's kind of mind-boggling how Martin writes all these wonderful, colorful, and totally unique characters. It's really, really incredible. But one of my favorite things about all these characters is the relationships that he builds between them. Dylan was talking about Kate and Eileen and their relationship, where they're almost kind of one mind. They live together their entire life in the way they bounce off each other and repeat each other, and their rapid-fire dialogue is so hilarious. And the way Helen abuses Bartley and is so mean to him, and then his occasional subtle witty dig that she doesn't quite get. It's just so much fun to watch the way these characters interact. As Johnny, the way he interacts with the doctor and his mammy is so fun and so hilarious and so just absolutely brilliant. These relationships between these characters is really, really special.
So Elijah mentioned the mammy, and so that is Johnnypateenmike's mom, who is in her 90s, and I think she is my favorite character in the whole show, because she is the only one in the entire show who can match Johnny's level of ridiculousness, his just energy, his wackiness. And so any scene with the mammy and Johnny in it is just an absolute all-out war of two hilarious characters going back and forth at each other, insulting the other, and then the other insulting back, one wishing the other was dead. If you just read the lines or listened to it, you'd think, oh, these people hate each other. But if you look deeper into it, you can see that there is a sort of relationship between them, that even though they're constantly at odds with each other, they still need each other, because they're the only people they really have at the end of the day.
So, Elijah, we've been making theater together for 4 years, and this is your last Outcry Youth Theatre show. Talk a little bit about how you're feeling, what your experience has been like, what you've learned, how you've grown, all of the things.
I mean, I don't think I've quite gotten to the level where my heart really understands that this is the end, because for the past 3.5 years, the longest I've not had rehearsal was like 4 weeks. And the fact that I'm never going to be able to make theater in the same context again it really sucks, and it really makes me sad. Outcry is such a special and amazing place to be and to work. It's been such a special thing in my life, and I've made so many special and amazing relationships here. It's really going to be hard not to come back. There's a moment Miss Becca and I like to reference from when we were doing the show Radium Girls in spring of 2017, I think it was. Miss Becca was shouting at someone because it was me. You were shouting at me. Miss Becca was shouting at me because I'd done something wrong or I didn't know my lines. I don't remember. Maybe she does. Do you remember?
I think you were just like not. It was like your big dramatic.
Yes, it was my big dramatic scene, and I just wasn't good yet. And she kept pushing me harder to go bigger and be better. And I'd heard some of my castmates, I didn't have a whole lot of experience at other theaters, but I'd heard some of my castmates talking about how their directors, they did wrong stuff and they messed up and they did stuff really bad, and they knew they did stuff really bad, and their directors were just going up to them and saying good job and giving them high fives. And Miss Becca wasn't letting me get away with that crap. She cares so much about making good theater that she is willing to be a little mean, get a little bit of dislike, to make this great and to make us better actors and to push us harder and farther. And I'm just so thankful that she cares so much. And I talked to her that night and thanked her for caring enough to push me to be better. And that was the moment when we became friends.
I love you.
I love you too. I just thought of a big theme that we haven't talked about yet that I wanted to mention, and that is, in this play, so many of these characters are mean, and so much of the comedy comes from a very dark place where we're kind of laughing at these characters' misfortunes. And there's a moment in this play where one of the characters is like, you shouldn't laugh at people's misfortunes. And the other character simply asks, why? And the answer to that is, I don't know. And so I think this play really explores, shouldn't you laugh at people's misfortunes? Why shouldn't you laugh at people's misfortunes? And maybe we can have some fun together laughing at people's misfortunes. And it's a really interesting theme that kind of this play centers around.
It's definitely a play about, is it okay to laugh at this? There's so much. I mean, the fact that the play revolves around a character who is disabled, who people are constantly making fun of, and it's a little bit funny sometimes. And is it okay to laugh about that, or is it not? I mean, there's many moments in the play about that. There's also a lot of, I think, one-upping of meanness and like who's meaner, and is it okay to be mean, or if you're mean to me, is it okay for you to say that it's not mean? For example, Billy says something to Johnny about how he's being mean, and Johnny says, well, you're hardly the world's authority on doing nice things, Billy, are you? Nobody is blameless, and nobody is someone who never says anything mean about someone else, especially in this world. Even Billy's aunties, who love him so much, are also constantly talking about how he's never going to get a date and how no one will ever love him. So everyone is mean in this play. That's what makes them so hilarious.
So funny.
Okay, why should people come see Outcry Youth Theatre's production of Martin McDonagh's The Cripple of Inishmaan?
While the title might be a bit drab at first, there is so much to this show, from the characters to like just the way they interact, the story, just everything about this show is just so unique, and it's kind of like in its own, I guess, like genre. There's so many sad elements, but there's so many other like funny elements along with it, and it kind of just builds up to be this just very amazing dark comedy while also being a little mildly offensive.
I mean, I think everyone should come see this show because it's just like freaking hilarious. Every character has something clever and funny to say. Every character has something interesting about them that you've never seen before. And I honestly think that if you come to see it more than once, I think you'll get a lot more out of it because there's just so much happening and it's so fast that a joke will be said, and by the time you're laughing about it, they're already on to the next joke. And so it's honestly kind of hard to keep up, but I think that's just what's so amazing about it. It's just so condensed, and it's so like packed jam full of all these amazing, colorful characters, scenes, lines, dialogue, monologues, all these different things. And I don't think anyone really anywhere has seen anything much like this.
I got 5 words for you. Eggs on Braden Sofa's face. I want you to let that one marinate. Let it soak in there. Also eggs on Peyton Nicholson's face, but I mean, I think we all know who we want to see eggs on the face of more. Also, a couple little tips for you coming to see this show. Keep your ears open to things that might not concern the characters actually on stage. Keep your ears open for characters like the Eggman and Jim Finnegan's daughter and Patty Brennan and Jack Ellery, because even though we never see these characters, some of the best jokes in the play are made about them. So this is a show that definitely really benefits from keeping your ears open and coming back to catch all these amazing, hilarious jokes.
You should come because it's Elijah's last show, and he's going to be phenomenal.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much for joining us for our latest episode of the Outcry Theatre Podcast. This podcast has been produced by me, Becca Johnson-Spinos, and edited by Jason Johnson-Spinos. For more information about the Cripple of Inishmaan and to purchase tickets, you can find us on Facebook or at our website, outcrytheatre.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your theater-loving friends.